Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today is Monday, which means it's time for an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use in Battlefield 4. The way you do this is you leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you'd like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Snecho. He says the Bad Company 2 Engineer loadout. Primary is the UMP-45 with a regular suppressor and the US red dot sight, using a basic urban camo to represent the UMP-45 in Bad Company 2. Secondary will be the M1911 with no attachments or camo. Gadget 1 will be the SRA, not the SMA, and then Gadget 2 will be the repair tool. Grenade will be M67 frag. Knife, bayonet, field upgrade, mechanic. And he finishes off his message with saying, here's to hoping that Battlefield Bad Company 3 is the next major Battlefield game. Now we know that there is going to be a Battlefield game coming out sometime in 2016. We don't know what it's going to be, but I imagine that we're going to find out pretty soon. Battlefield 4 reveal trailer was in March, so that's when we found out what Battlefield 4 was going to be. And then the game came out at the end of October, early November. So we've got a game that's scheduled potentially for holiday season 2016. I imagine we're going to find out what it's going to be sometime in February or March. So we're not going to have to wait too long to figure out what the next Battlefield game is. Who wants to take bets? I don't know if I'd put my money on Bad Company 3 as much as I would love that to be the next Battlefield game. Anyway, let's talk this loadout. I like the UMP-45 from a design standpoint. In game, it's an alright PDW. I think I actually prefer the UMP-9 to this one. But the UMP-45 is something that you should not underestimate in close quarters by any means. It does 30 damage maximum, so it's a 4-shot kill, and it's got a little bit of flexibility with that drop-off as well. Now, of course, with such a high damage per shot, the trade-off is usually a slower rate of fire. Sure enough, this gun has a 600 round per minute rate of fire, definitely on the slower side, so it's going to be a little bit trickier to use as a spray and pray weapon. It could be somewhat effective if you're using a laser sight with it and wanted to do some hip firing, but it does have a fast reload time, so that is pretty good if you're trying to take on multiple targets at a time. You're not going to really be held back by how fast you can reload this weapon, which makes it good for aggressive tactics. If you burn through 2 people, need to reload your magazine and take out their other 2 squad mates, you can do that pretty quickly. When it comes to sidearm, the M1911 I feel is such a popular sidearm just in general, but also in many of the loadout requests I get. I'm almost always running the M1911. It is a good sidearm, and I say this every time, but it is specifically good at taking out one target. When you got to deal with multiple targets, it simply doesn't have the ammo capacity really to dish out that kind of damage. So it's a great sort of backup sidearm if you need to finish off one last target, but if you're planning on taking on multiple infantry, forget it. The SRA is one of those rocket launchers that's gone through so many changes during this game. Sometimes it's hard to keep up. It used to be really good, then it got nerfed, now it's kind of somewhere in between. It's hard to say. In a infantry intensive game mode, I definitely wouldn't pick the SRA. I would absolutely pick the SMA or RPG, as those tend to have a better effect against infantry overall, and their travel speed is faster, so you can kind of snipe people at long range, especially with the SMA because of how fast it is. I love that for infantry game modes. In vehicle game modes, it's great for sort of hitting tanks at extreme long ranges, and if you have a whole squad of SRA users, you can dish out massive damage to tanks because of your ability to change the trajectory of the rocket mid-flight. It used to be a lot better for hitting air targets. It is much more challenging now, not impossible by any means, but I would almost universally prefer to have a SMA instead of a SRA when it comes to air targets. And if you are just planning on going up exclusively against jets or fighters, I mean, just pick a Stinger. It's ultimately going to yield you better results. Now, I know a lot of these engineer-style loadouts, especially using the mechanic perk and stuff like that, people want me to play on Conquest Large maps. I did actually play quite a bit on Conquest Large. The footage was so sparse and kind of boring, in my opinion, that I didn't use any of it, because Conquest is not as fast-paced or action-packed. I don't think it makes the best clips for YouTube. I spent a lot of my time, repping tanks, or like running around, getting shot by tanks, hitting tanks, having them kill me. It's just not the most entertaining footage out there. Even though this loadout here is specifically designed for Conquest Large, I just didn't find it to be that effective overall, simply because the PDW is a terrible Conquest Large weapon. It is just garbage for anything beyond close range. especially with the suppressor on it. It makes it almost impossible to use at those further ranges. So you're forced to close the distance, and that often isn't possible in Conquest Large or Battlefield 4, because despite this being a cover shooter, there is often a lack of cover when it comes to larger scale maps. Now, the US style red dot sight is one of those sights that's very cool. It's throwback. It reminds me of classic Battlefield. I like it a lot, and I would use it all the time if it weren't for the fact that there were just simply better optics out there, and there's no optic restriction in Battlefield 4. A lot of other games these days, especially milsim games, are doing optical restrictions because they're trying to simulate like armies fighting each other. So if you're playing for the Russians and you're running an AK, you can only use Russian spec sights. It looks more realistic and it makes more sense. Rainbow Six Siege is doing this now too. But in Battlefield, you can use whatever optic you would like. It would be kind of interesting if you could only use Chinese optics on Chinese weapons, Russian optics on Russian weapons, and US optics on US weapons. Well, technically, most of the United States weapons are designed in other countries these days. Germany, Switzerland, Belgium. I mean, that's probably where most of the weapons that we actually use in our military come from. I don't know how many of our US weapons are actually still designed in the US. Granted, we do still manufacture a lot of them here. Now, despite this Loadout being intended for Conquest Large, you can see how just effective it is on these smaller infantry-based maps, and that is simply because of the suppressor staying off the minimap. Battlefield is a mini-map shooter. It's all about that 3D spotting, checking the mini-map for where your opponents are. I mean, it practically doesn't even matter about your eyesight these days, you know, whether or not you can see somebody lurking around in front of you. Just check that mini-map and check the 3D spotting, and you should be good to go. But if you have a weapon that keeps you off the mini-map when you fire it, I mean, holy crap, that's like half the battle right there. You've just outsmarted half of the enemy team. So it allows you to get around much more stealthily, and a lot of your opponents won't even realize that you're behind them on a flank, killing their teammates until it's way too late. Now, of course, this usually hurts you more than it helps on Conquest Large, because although staying off the minimap is helpful, the muzzle velocity reduction of a suppressor hurts you so much in ranged engagements on this Conquest Large maps that it doesn't matter too much. And if you can't shoot somebody while trying to cross a big open field or a street or something like that, then you've kind of lost all those battles right there. Again, I think the whole concept of pairing the PDWs with the engineer class is based on the idea that engineers will most likely be found in vehicles in an actual battlefield environment, so they need a small weapon that can easily fit into a vehicle and that they can shoulder while in a vehicle, maybe shoot out the window of a Humvee or something like that. And then when they actually get out on the battlefield, which is where you see most engineers in this actual game, the PDW doesn't make that much sense for medium and long range engagement. So it's kind of a weird sort of balance between realism and gameplay that I don't think quite balanced out that well in the long run. They still do kick a lot of ass in CQB combat though. It's just the engineer isn't necessarily the most ideal CQB class out there. Then again, the small can be a lot of fun in CQB. Not a lot of people expect it, and especially on maps that have a lot of destruction, it can be a total blast, no pun intended. And as much fun as this class could have been to play on Bad Company 2, it just isn't holding up in Battlefield 4. It's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of ideas that don't really fit together. Close quarter weapon, long range rocket launcher, and nothing for in between leaves you in a sticky situation in anything beyond close range. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave your comments down below for next week's episode of Loadout, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.